Hi, and welcome to today's episode, which is going to be on succession planning. This is the first part in a series of looking at your long-term business strategy. It's a little bit different, and we hope you're going to enjoy the episode. Right, hello. Today we're going to talk about long-term business strategy and what you can do about buying businesses, succession planning. So today we're going to talk about succession planning, and what that actually means is when you're obviously going to leave, or somebody's going to take over your business, who's going to take over your business, or if you're moving, from being quite operational and now you're wanting to basically become more of a CEO, managing director, who's going to take over your role. So it'll be quite good to explore that today, John. I have lots of kind of different examples of it, of different kind of companies that have got it, and I'm also wanting to kind of go through it myself with succession planning, and it'd be good just to kind of talk about it and share some value to the listeners. So have you any examples of succession planning, or what's your background on it?
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that I'm interested in. It's something I've thought about a lot. One of the things was when I'd set up Hybrid Anchor, I was trying to think, well, what does that look like long term? So my initial intention was to build up a group, so basically a group holding of companies. So by, let's say, 5 years in, I'd have 10 businesses. By 10 years in, you'd hope to have somewhere in the region of 40 businesses. So that's quite a different way of thinking about the business. But obviously, as you scale up, you can't be the person that's running all of these businesses and operating it. And I think it's part of this entire series that we're talking about is all about how do we acquire businesses or structure businesses, how do we plan that strategy to take into account that we're going to be running these companies like short term, but what does it actually look like to exit it? An exit doesn't need to necessarily mean like you just completely release the company and you sell it. Exit can look like different things. So succession management for me had came up onto the table when one of the companies I've been forming under Hybrid Anchor, I could see that it was going to take a lot of time, and my concern became, how am I going to manage that? There's going to be an expectation there that if I take the equity that's been basically built against this company, the investors will expect to see that someone like me is driving the company forward. So what I kind of looked at was, right, what would I do with Hybrid Anchor in that scenario, right? So let's say, for example, that doesn't come off for another 6 months. Okay, so now it's pushed 6 months down the road. But I still kind of liked the way my mind was thinking about it, because it was almost like, how would I be able to supplant myself in Hybrid Anchor? Like, so what do I do there? Do I put an office manager in? Do I put an MD in? How much does an MD cost? Who would I even put as an MD? Which got me thinking about, okay, there is actually 3 or 4 names, bless you, there's 3 or 4 names that come to mind, and I'm thinking, right, I could put one of them in place, but I'd have to have that discussion. Are they even interested in that? Like, would they share those values? Would they push the company in a sort of positive light? Because we're quite early on in a stage for the business. So succession planning for me, I think it's all about having that. But also when you think about it as a business owner, you've got the Robert Kiyosaki model, where you've got a job, you've got a business, like you're self-employed, but you've really given yourself a self-employed job. You've got a business like what we run, where we're owner-operators, and then you've got like the investor, like the business runs, Market Mavens, Hybrid Anchor runs, but literally it's your company, but you're not in it. And I think what I'm trying to do is get into that I column, but I'm also still really passionate about what the business does. So I'm kind of thinking, I want to be there and drive it, but I wouldn't like to be sort of like camped on someone's shoulder going, I wouldn't do that, I would do this, that type of thing. So I really want to treat it the way I treat my other investments, where I sit in the back seat and then they push it forward. So that's where it first kind of came into my mind, and I thought it's a brilliant topic for us to discuss on this, because succession planning isn't always what I'm talking about there. There's all different kind of methods of it. What about yourself? Where are you in the journey with it?
So I've definitely came off the tools more since bringing on more staff. I'm looking within the team for succession planning, so I'm looking for the kind of superstars to then take over my role, that's basically operations and running the people of the business, while I'm looking to try and scale Marketing Mavens out with Glasgow and start looking across the UK. I think, I have been thinking a lot about it, and we're probably still in a bit of the planning phase. There's probably going to have to be a couple of hires from succession planning, because within my role, I'm customer success, I'm also business development, I'm always, so I think that there'll probably be like little small roles.
I have to break out any silos almost.
And then somebody that kind of sits on top and goes, right, just make sure everything's kind of working and the processes are all working properly. But I also feel as I move up, because what I'm going to look to do, and we'll probably talk about in future episodes, is I'm actually going to be buying businesses and taking over businesses. But I probably will need somebody to, when I buy that business, to go like almost a right hand man or woman or trusted person to say, you take over this business. You need to implement my standard operating procedures. Implement the Marketing Maven's way, and then take it forward from there. So I will probably need to hire from that. Trying to get somebody like that as well, I think could be difficult, because there's going to be a massive amount of trust in that role, because they have to essentially do what I would have done. Like take essentially my head, my culture, the way that the business is supposed to be run, and really understand that, and then start basically.
So it's an interesting way of looking at it as well, because I suppose the positives of hiring from within a team are they already get the culture, so they know how the company is operated for that time period. I suppose playing devil's advocate on it, the downside of it would be, do they have the managerial experience? So in the same way as the best salesman doesn't make the best sales manager, the best sales or like the best kind of management team doesn't always make the best director, because there's like an entrepreneurial part to that as well. Not to say that it couldn't work, but obviously it's something to be weighed up. Or is it a combination role where you bring in that entrepreneurial spirit from the outside, or somebody that does showcase that within your team, but then that's kind of mentored and flourished, so maybe it's you become more of a mentor before you release, so you're almost like coaching the person into it. I've seen that happen, and generally it's done in businesses that are family businesses, and they maybe bring like a son or a daughter or a cousin or something, and they basically mentor them into the position, and then say, look, this isn't going to be yours, so in 6 months, providing you can come up to scratch with that, this will be your business. And you will be given a small stake in it, but that can grow depending on what your ambition is and how much you add into the revenue. I think I got excited by the idea of pulling outside talent. So let's say, for example, I could build the company up to £860,000 turnover, and you're thinking that's a healthy-ish profit for turnover for an agency that's maybe doing 30-40% profit. That's a good size for it to get to. But there'll be people that are more mature than me in their business thinking that would take that to 3 or 4 million, because that's what they're used to. They're used to taking an asset this size and then putting it to that size. So I think that's quite exciting as well. And surprisingly, I actually done this as research for myself, because I was looking for an MD for the company prior. And when you look at it, I'd actually lined up a few sort of candidates for that, where you're thinking they've got a really brilliant track record in this space. But interestingly, the investor doesn't see them as an asset. So they were almost like kind of treating them like an employee. And I'm thinking, this guy has added like almost a 5 times multiplier to the yield of your company. Like it's a no-brainer to me. So I found 2 that I was thinking of, and now I've kind of got them sitting like kind of like unplayed playing cards, in the sense of, right, eventually you'll go, right, well, there's 1, there's 2. But the question is, how do you then scale that? Because if you're going to have 6 or 7 or 8 companies, they might not all be candidates for merging them flat. So you need to kind of think about, well, how many MDs are we talking about,
How do you find the MDs?
So I look for characteristics. So I try to almost do it. You would probably know it more as like your audience persona is like, what does that candidate look like? So I'm looking for someone that is of a certain age, a certain energy, a certain skill set, and I'm looking for either they've got an operations role or a managing director role, and they're maybe a pseudo kind of director, so they're given a directorship within a much larger organisation. And I believe that if you can find the right person like that they might be more interested to be the captain of their own ship. Because let's say, for example, we're both directors and we're in a large organisation, so I won't name any because we don't want to kick up fires for no reason. But if we were then having to report back to the group and say, look, this is what I want to do. I want to take some of the company's funds here and acquire that company over there, merge it flat into the structure. We're going to go lean for about a year, maybe a year and a half, but then after that we should see a 3-4 times yield on what we've actually just purchased. I think that a lot of groups push back on that because they're like, oh, this is a bit cavalier, it's a bit risky, and you're like, well, a lot of entrepreneurs, they are that. Like, I'm definitely, if you think of like low risk, high risk, I'm right at the very edge of, you know, I'll take a punt and I know I'll be able to sell my way through it in most cases. Whereas other entrepreneurs are like, look, I'm quite comfortable where I am, I don't want to take the risks, and you've got everything in between. So to a group like that, they won't necessarily want me to do that. Whereas if I was the guy that was the captain of that ship, you could take that kind of punt. And you do see it with companies, like look at things like Facebook or various other organisations. He knew that like if he gave up that kind of control of the company or sold out to a larger entity, he would no longer be in control of that. So the company would look very different to how it looks today. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for the reverse of that. I'm looking for the guy that's already taken the devil's coin and he's sitting in an organisation, or she's sitting in an organisation at the operations level. There's maybe a group or something to report to above, and they would like to kind of run their own destiny, where it's like they have a lot more autonomy on their role.
And would you just find these people on LinkedIn, or is there like websites?
Primarily, that's where I found. Like, so the two that I'm thinking of, I actually knew them from a past life. Right. So, like most people, I collect people in the sense of, you know, so say like yourself, Mark's a highly driven guy. I would like to kind of keep in contact with Mark. I could see us maybe having business opportunities together. He's quite a driven person, and I would almost like file it for later. I don't know what the opportunity looks like, but I think I could do something with that person at some point. So even when I first met them, I thought, there's a driver, there's another driver. It's so unusual to meet them that you know yourself straight away, you're going, I'd love that guy to be the person that's running my company. So I've kind of like kept that relationship warm. We'll go out for dinners, we'll keep in touch, how's the family, how's things. And probably they're oblivious to that, the fact that you're thinking, right, I could see them in the company maybe 5 years or 3 years, but I've kind of just kept tabs on them. But out with that, I've also looked through LinkedIn, I've looked at other organisations, so I'll try and find a company that's maybe similar to the type of company I'm thinking of, and then I'll look at who's in their hierarchy and maybe start to like court those kind of people, you know, like, do you fancy going for a dinner sometime? Yeah. You're really passionate about, it's not an influencer marketing business, but imagine it was. Yeah. So then if I'm talking to an influencer marketing agency, I could then talk to their directors, I could talk to the owner of that company, what are their plans, are they thinking about exit? And it's about taking your time, because opportunities will always surface, whether it's a case of their company might become available for sale, or actually everything isn't okay at home. You know, there's problems with the business. People will tell you that when you take them out, and I think it's something about having food as well. See, just having food and it's just a kind of casual chat, and you'll find that there is opportunities to get in there. And
you have a set criteria when you're looking for that managing director, that person.
So there's an ideal sort of fit. Like not always. So like somebody that's quite maverick and different, that interests me as well, because it's like, oh, cool. I wouldn't have thought of doing that. That's kind of cool as well. But there is like a kind of general list. Like, I want the person to be highly ethical, and I would like the person to put the customers first rather than the profit. So I don't think, for me personally, a transactional person would be a fit for me. But for other companies it might be, because it's like, well, look, I just want you to make an obscene amount of money and I don't really care, so just do that at all expense. Whereas to me, that doesn't sit well with my values. So I would like all the kind of people I hire actually to do that, including directors' roles. And if you think about it, values come from the top. So if you have like a management team that's kind of like, I know we've got all this stuff on the wall, but I don't care about that, just get it sold. And you're thinking, mate, that's not how we run this company. And you can see that will have a massively negative impact on what you do. And I think that's a danger, and a lot of the reason probably why a lot of people think succession management's not possible, because they're thinking, well, could I find somebody that would have the passion that I have for the customers and the business, and it's going to look after it, because it's kind of like their baby, their business is their child.
It's a really really interesting point that you make, because it's like going out and sourcing a managing director that's at a company, or an operations director's at a company, versus training your staff to become the succession planning. So, you know, what one's actually going to work better? You know, there's lots of pros, I would say, with your own staff because they have the culture, but then the cons are, do they have the managerial experience? Then you're going to have to put them through certain training. Do they even want that role? They might be very comfortable in the role that they currently have, versus then taking somebody out there that has the skills but then doesn't really get the culture, and then you need to try not make sure that they understand the culture. And then there's also another part of it is saying that your staff don't like this new managing director. They you like them, you feel that they've got the criteria and that they're a good fit, but actually the staff don't. Because I know that my staff like me. If I was to bring somebody else in and say, right, now this is your boss, see you later guys, would they be happy?
And that's why I think that kind of hard transition's dangerous. Like I would probably phase it personally, where it's kind of as if like you guys are great, you're very independent, almost make yourself useless. Like that's kind of one of the things I would say is anyone that wants to get off the tools, as hard as it is for any business owner, because we've all got egos, but we kind of need to get beyond this, like I am the sole entity of all answers, and we need to get to that position where, right, let's say you come to me and you say, oh, how does this work with conversion rate optimization? Right, so obviously I know the answer to that, but then I would be kind of going like, it's a great question actually, I'm not sure. Dennis, you got a second? Aye, Mark asked a really great question then. He was asking about conversion rate optimization, and Dennis is probably looking at me as if like, what the hell's he talking about? Like, John must know the answer to that surely. It can't be that bad off the tools. But they don't see the reasoning of it. So eventually it's like the staff realise, wait, every time I ask him a question he shouts over Dennis. So Dennis must be the guy to go to for all those kind of questions. So I think there's almost like a bridging standpoint of maybe 6 months where you start to like yield down the dependency on yourself and map it to another person. So they could work within the business as like say an operations director and then pivot into the role where you say, look, I think Dennis has been, he's just a fantasy guy we've made up, but I just think he's a great guy. He's a great guy, he's done really well, look at the systems he's brought in, everybody loves him. But then you can see, right, this is the plan, Dennis. The plan is you would take over this business, but I need to see you would look after the staff, how you would manage things, and I will increasingly give you more independence and more autonomy over the business as that trust builds, and likewise you'll be compensated accordingly. So the goal that we are working towards is in 6 months' time you'll be the managing director, right? So he knows what he's working to, the staff don't know that, but then there's this kind of phasing idea of, right, he's coming up to speed, and then you can kind of say, look, I think it's quite clear, guys, that I'm trying to build up a group of companies, I'm doing all this kind of stuff here, I'm actually really happy with what Dennis or insert name has done for the company, and I want to promote him to the MD and have him running that. It should be obvious in their mind why that's happened, because it's not a surprise. It's not like one day we came in and we flipped a light switch and people went, where's Mark, where's John, and there's just this new person kind of sitting there going, oh, just wait, we don't want that.
It's a really good way that you put it, a really good kind of plan, in the way that you say that, because that is a great way for them to kind of transition into it. And actually, when I think back to it, probably most succession planning companies, well, most companies that was at and they've been bought over, that's probably the way that happened. Somebody came in and it was...
You blend it.
They blended it. It was like their operations director, and they're coming in and, that guy Ash, he's a good guy, he's a good laugh. And then they slowly but surely go, all right, see you later,
I think it.
Ash is now the new boss. What I was going to say is this is quite interesting as well. So you bring in a new managing director. You've built up, and I've built up, a nucleus of contacts, be it an accountant, a HR person, different coaches. Do you get them to have their own network of people, or do you say, no, you must use my HR people, you must use my accountant, you must use my my business? Well, coaches would be a little bit different, but
I think it's a great question actually. So I don't think there's a right answer to that, to be honest, because I think in one school of thought you've had X amount of years in business with these kind of people, but would you like to work with my team when I've assembled them versus your own team that you already know works? So I think that most people taking a new role probably wouldn't bring in their own team initially anyway. I think they would try to work with the team that's in place. Because for the same thing, like, so if I took over a company and they had, like, say, you know, they work with XYZ accountant and they do this and they do that, I would kind of put it out to them saying, look, I understand that you were the suppliers of the previous organisation, and I want to try and keep these relationships, so I'm not a breaker of relationships. If I can benefit from what you do and you can show me how it's valuable and how you're helping the company, I'm all up for kind of keeping you here. But I will be honest by it, it is under review. So if it's a case that I feel that it's not up to the calibre that I expect from previous organisations I've been a director of, I will look to supplant that with someone from my own sort of network. But that being said, I do want to work with you and I want to kind of build a relationship there. Because I think anyone's like that. I mean, we used to do this even with, say when we're working with a client and you have like a marketing manager or an e-commerce manager leave, or a project manager, if your contact on the other side of that leaves, I'm like, game's a bogey, it's a new game, this is a brand new client, and they're like, what are you talking about, John? We've worked with this client for 5 years. No, we haven't, because now this is Mark Conley, he's a marketing manager, previously it was X, so you need to remap that relationship. So I think once you kind of remove those sort of key suppliers, it's quite a dangerous thing for a new MD to do that, so I don't think a lot of them will do it. But me personally, I would give them the autonomy of it, because it's like, there's nothing worse than having a manager's job, but you're not allowed to fire anyone. So it's like, I think that Becky should be fired. Why? Well, she's not doing her job. Alright, but she's late every day, she's disruptive, she doesn't do the tasks, she's not living the values of the brand. But you feel this kind of like, Becky's a nice person, and but you're not managing her anymore, it's this person's manager. So it's like almost for us to say, no you don't, and then Becky says, see, you can't fire me because he's still the manager, you know?
And I think you've got a point there as well. It depends on the succession planning example. You know, if the succession planning is, I'm away exiting the business, somebody else is taking over, and then really you should let them kind of run it and do the way that they
unless they're really sort of, if it's going like Mayday, you know, we've took a 40% hit on revenue, and you're kind of like, whoa, like, can we have a meeting here? Right, what's happening? You know?
Because like my brother, he's taken over my mum's business. So my mum had a cleaning business, ran it from 2003, really successful, and then she wants to go into retirement, and she's let Kevin sort of take over the business, but it's almost with a, you're taking it over, but I'll take, you know, the profit of the business, and that's essentially what's going to, you know, buy me out and buy the shares.
That's the buying out within it, so buying out profit structure.
So there's kind of a bit of succession planning in there, but you can see it. So like Kevin's obviously trying to go in and, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to put these systems in place, and she's very much no, that's not, like, because she's done it and it's not worked, she's like, don't go down that route, spending that money and time and effort, it won't work because I've done it won't work again. So it's quite funny to see it, you know, from a family point of view, get the frustrations from both sides, and that's like a family sort of side. It would be a little bit different if it's not family as well, because you know, sometimes it's not family, like, I won't say anything, but I'll go home with the wife and I'll...
You're like, this is like, you're like, why are you not telling them that? Why are you telling me this but not telling them that? You know, you're like, oh well.
I know, but I think, you know what it's like as well, it's your baby, and you build up a business, it's yours, and you're the only one that cares about your business the way that you would.
You care about it.
Nobody's going to care about it that much. No staff member, no person that you bring into the business. Yes, they'll probably, I think you bring somebody into the business, yes, they'll probably care, but they won't care as much as you ever would. And handing that over to somebody else, it's like, wait a minute, you need to treat it like this, and you need to feed it 3 times.
That's a process.
You know,
I think though, like the trick in it, I guess, would be getting them to take ownership of the business, where they feel like it's like theirs, and that it's their opportunity. So someone coming into it thinking, this is a real opportunity for me to prove something to myself, because I quite like the deals that are struck where, let's say they get something like 5 or 10% equity, but they get increasing equity based on the value they bring. So if you can 3 times multiply the kind of profitability and turnover of the business, then I will increase your share accordingly to that. So we'll actually like work out what value you've contributed, and then basically you can earn those part of the shares. So you can set KPIs of the MD to say, look, this is what we are agreeing together. this is your plan. Like, they need to outline like what they're going to do. So there is no sort of like we'll wing it and we'll see. Like there's a, what is the 5-year plan? Like, what are we going to do with the business? What's your ideas? Because it lets you see where they're thinking. Because as you say, they could be thinking down a kind of crazy lane, and you're like, you know, interestingly what you said there though, I've tried this before, it didn't work, is what your mum had said. However, that doesn't mean it wouldn't work for someone else, because times change.
Yeah.
So, you know, the entire world is like, why does McDonald's not deliver? Why does McDonald's not deliver for the entire time I grew up? And then it was like, that's just not a thing. I'm like, but it should be. And then it took COVID for it to just like completely crack the back of that, and then say, actually now everything's delivery. And I'm actually thinking like, well, basically you should be able to get delivery from Semichem, or you know, I need a loaf of bread, or I want a can of Coke, whatever. Like, you should just be able to order whatever you want, and it arrives to you same day. And that's the world we're heading into, you know. It's, so I think like things do change, but that's coming from experience as well, where it's like, look, I've already bled quite a lot of revenue trying to chase down some of these ideas, and I know they look attractive and they look like they'd work out, but they don't always work out.
So how important do you think SOPs and having the right systems and processes are in succession planning?
I would say it's massively important. Like, when I kind of think about it, right, so your processes are what dictates how the business operates. And it's kind of like, right, if I get hit by a bus, somebody could in theory come in, sit in my chair and say, right, how do we handle that scenario? Oh, there's an SOP on that, standard operating procedure, do this, do that, speak to this person, and they're all named, or groups are named, and who belongs to the groups are named. So I would then know, like, there's the person that deals with it. So it makes it easier, I think, to kind of take over something. I actually know a lot of people that will not acquire a business unless it has its kind of processes written down. Because you're thinking, right, well, I'm going to have to deal with it. Like, you've no idea what kind of level of madness is going on in there, and you're thinking, so what is the kind of process for that? What is the process? And you ask 4 people and they tell you 4 different answers, and you go, that's scary. So it's like, same client, different processes, everybody's got their own ideas, it's bedlam. So I would say personally, to me, I think it's really important. I think kind of showing somebody how something works, it's kind of like the manual, the documentation. So kind of like, if you buy a piece of software, I want all the docs, I want diagrams of how the information flows together, and for a business the exact same way. And if you don't have it, I would kind of expect then that there's more on the table, because you're kind of thinking, I'm going to have to create all that.
How do you ensure that they follow the SOP then?
I suppose in a way you can't, because if you hire them and you give them the autonomy, it's kind of up to them what they do at the end of the day. However, what I would probably do is I would keep an eye on the metrics. So if the KPIs start slipping, and the KPIs don't need to just be sales, the KPIs could be customer satisfaction. So I've noticed a 100% decline in customer satisfaction scores, which tells me that we're not following our review process. What do you mean? We're not following our review process. How do you know that? And it says, well, I'm not seeing these emails. So I'm used to seeing X amount of 5-star reviews coming through for X amount of period of time, and it's stopped. I'm also seeing no surveys, and I've looked at the CRM, there's no, you know what I mean? So there's tools to be able to see, are these processes being adhered to? Not necessarily they follow to the letter, but by looking at the output, I could kind of see that guy I put there as MD's not doing that. So then I could have a chat and say, like, let's have a board meeting, let's have a discussion about it. Why are we not following the SOPs? You know, and then I would try and understand. But I wouldn't like kind of try and spy on them and see, are they following the SOPs, or did he ask you for that? I would try and set the systems up where I could see it, whether it's happening or not. It's kind of like a salesperson. Are you doing sales? Yeah, I'm doing sales. Well, I don't need to ask you that. I can look at your timesheet and I can look at your CRM, and then I could actually see he's not doing anything because there's no any feed in there, you know.
Great. Okay, John, so what is your business belter for today?
So biggest business belter for me for succession planning would be asking yourself the question. So like try and picture yourself in this scenario. Someone comes up to you and they offer you £100 million business for you to run, and that instantly means that you need to come up with a game plan to replace yourself in your own business without using any of the funds of the other company, because that's not part of the deal. So you need to put it onto autopilot. And the reason why I think that's important is it instantly puts you into a position where you're thinking, right, who am I going to, what's the processes, what will they need in place, and you very quickly distill what's important to continuing to run that business. Now, whatever you write down there is effectively your game plan for getting succession management. So it's none of this, in theory, 5-6 years I'll be able to kind of step down for the business. It's literally a cold cut, here's what I'm going to have to do it. And the reason why I think this is, one of my friends is like a serial entrepreneur, like they purchase businesses all the time, and that's what they said is the way that you grow businesses is based around the quality of questions that you ask of yourself, not about what your kind of strategy is with the business. So like that type of question, that's a pretty big fundamental question, but thinking from that perspective, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a pretty solid answer, what it's going to take to get that in place for your business, because you will flag up all the, well, I could bring in an MD, but what about this, what about that?
Yeah.
Well, that needs to be resolved as well then. Are you really going to walk away for this £100 million opportunity by not solving it? And just writing that down as a half pager, I think is a great starting place. Amazing. So that'd be my belter.
And my business belter would be kind of just taken from your point, is really getting the criteria and building that sort of persona down of who you would want to basically succeed in your business. I think that would then help you understand if you want to basically progress a person that's within your company versus actually going out and trying to get another person that's an operations director or a managing director. I think understanding the specific criteria to hand over your business to them is really, really important, and it's probably an amazing job to take forward at the very, very starting point. That would be my business better. So do you want to wrap us up for today?
Yeah, no problem at all. So you probably noticed that today is a little bit different, and the reason for that is we're not doing the standard business belters format. Although we're analysing a topic, we're actually looking at this as a series of belters. So the idea is to really analyse that long-term strategy, what is involved in the business and what are the different sides and facets of looking at that. So succession management's one of them. Next time we're going to be talking about what it's like to run a lifestyle business and really trying to analyse the different ways that businesses can be progressed. We've noticed that there's been a great uptake on the podcast. We're loving seeing all the engagement that you guys are putting in as well. Please do keep doing that. Add your comments in. Remember to share the show. Subscribe. We love to see that you guys are getting something out of it. Even people I'm bumping into now are saying, oh, I listen to Business Belters. I've heard you and Mark. And it's nice to see that because we put a lot of effort into the show and it's always good to see that that's kind of coming across well as well. So as per usual, please share the show, like it, show us some kind of comments or some feedback, and hopefully we'll be able to take some of what you say into future episodes. So all that's left to say is it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from him.
See you later, guys.